My name is Madison, and I am 32 years old. For 10 years, I wasn't just my family's daughter. I was their high-yield savings account, their bailout plan, their silent partner in a lifestyle they couldn't afford. But this Christmas Eve, in the middle of a dinner that cost more than my first car, the contract finally expired. The dining room of the glass house sat perched on the hills of California, a transparent box of light floating above the city. Everything about it screamed money. The crystal chandelier, the imported velvet chairs, the caterers moving silently in the background. My mother, Brenda, sat to my right, dripping in diamonds I knew were bought on credit. My father, Jeffrey, sat opposite her, expanding his chest like he owned the world. And my brother, Kyle, the golden boy who had failed at everything except spending money, was already halfway through a bottle of vintage wine. The air smelled of expensive perfume and malice. I had arrived 10 minutes early, carrying a small, wrapped box. Inside was a hand-knitted scarf, made from rare alpaca wool. I had made it myself over 3 months of quiet evenings. It was personal. It was thoughtful. It was, in my mother's eyes, garbage. Before the first course was served, Brenda picked up the box, shook it, and frowned. "What is this?" she asked, her voice carrying that practiced tone of disappointment. "It's a scarf, Mom," I said. "I made it." She didn't even open it. She tossed it toward the fireplace. It landed on the hearth, dangerously close to the flames. "I don't need a scarf, Madison," she said, wiping her hands as if she'd touched something dirty. "I need you to stop being selfish. If you want to make me happy, write a check for your brother. He needs $300,000 for his new investment. Watching you hoard your money while he suffers is embarrassing." The room went silent. Kyle smirked, swirling his wine. "Yeah, Maddie. It's called family capital. Don't be so cheap." My father nodded, his face hardening. 300,000. Consider it an investment. Transfer it tonight." I looked at them, really looked at them. For years, I had seen them through a fog of obligation. But tonight, the fog cleared. I checked my watch. 11:59 p.m. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I placed my phone on the table, face up, next to the untouched crystal wine glass. "I'm not paying for this dinner," I said, my voice quiet but cutting through the room like a razor. "And neither are you. Before I tell you what happens when a CFO declares war on her own family, drop a comment below. What's the most unreasonable financial demand a family member has ever made of you? I'm reading every single one." My father stared at me, his mouth open, a piece of roast beef halfway to his lips. "What did you say?" I didn't repeat myself. I didn't need to. I simply unlocked my phone screen. The app was already open, glowing with a singular, red button labeled Protocol 0. I tapped it. There was no whirring of machinery. No warning, beep. The result was instantaneous. The crystal chandelier above us died. The recessed lighting in the hallway vanished. The entire glass house plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. A split second later, the emergency system kicked in. Harsh, rhythmic strobe lights began to flash in the corners of the room, painting my family in stuttering bursts of blue and white. It wasn't festive. It looked like a police raid. "What is this?" Brenda shrieked, clutching her pearls. "Jeffrey, fix the lights." Then came the sound that really mattered. The distinct, heavy, mechanical thud of the smart locks engaging on the front and back doors. We were sealed in. "It's a security glitch," Jeffrey barked, standing up so fast his chair tipped over. "I'll handle it." I watched him in the strobe light, his face a mask of confusion. He didn't know yet. He didn't know that for 30 years. He had looked at me and seen a retirement plan, not a daughter. To Jeffrey and Brenda, raising me hadn't been an act of love. It was a venture capital investment. They had put in food and shelter when I was small, the bare minimum seed capital, and now that I was a CFO, they felt entitled to the dividends. They believed they owned my success because they believed they owned me. They treated my bank account like a ledger they held the rights to, simply because they had signed the birth certificate. But investors can be fired. The head caterer, a man named Davis, who looked ready to bolt, stepped forward with a flashlight. "Mr. Stone," he said, his voice trembling. "Before the power went, the payment terminal timed out. I need to settle the bill now. $15,000. "Fine," Jeffrey shouted, digging into his jacket pocket. He pulled out the black titanium card, the one with his name on it, the one linked directly to my Prime credit line. "Take it. And get the lights back on." Davis swiped the card on his handheld reader. The machine lit up the darkness with a harsh red glow. It let out a long, flat beep. "Declined. Stolen card." "Try it again," Jeffrey snapped, sweat beading on his forehead. "It says stolen." "Sir," Davis said, stepping back, "I have to confiscate it." "Give me that," Jeffrey lunged. But the strobe lights disoriented him, and he stumbled into the table. "It's not a glitch." "Dad," I said. My voice was calm, cutting through the panic like a knife through silk. "I reported it stolen 3 minutes ago, along with the cards Mom is carrying, and the lease on Kyle's Porsche." "You did what?" Kyle roared, standing up. "You can't do that, that's my car." "Is it?" I asked. I swiped up on my phone screen. "Because according to the police report I filed this morning, it was leased using a stolen identity." I tapped the AirPlay icon. The massive television screen, mounted above the fireplace, flickered to life, powered by the backup battery. It didn't show a Christmas movie. It showed a PDF. It was a criminal docket. State of California versus Kyle Stone. Felony embezzlement. The $300,000 they had demanded wasn't for an investment. It was for a settlement to keep Kyle out of prison. "I know about the embezzlement, Kyle," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "And I know Mom and Dad were going to use my money to pay your victims to stay quiet." Brenda let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. "Madison, stop this. You're humiliating us." "I'm not humiliating you," I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. "I'm auditing you." Jeffrey slammed his fist on the table, shaking the silverware. "Unlock the doors. Madison, right now, or so help me." "Or what?" I asked. "You'll cut me off. You'll write me out of the will I already paid for the house you're standing in." "Dad, you have nothing left to threaten me with." The strobe lights flashed again, freezing their faces in a tableau of horror. They weren't scared because I was leaving. They were scared because the ATM had just developed a voice, and it was saying access denied. I didn't run. I didn't rush. I simply tapped the unlock icon on my phone for the front door only. The heavy bolt slid back with a smooth, expensive click. I stepped out into the cool night air, the silence of the California hills washing over me like water. Behind me, I heard Jeffrey screaming my name, throwing his weight against the door. I tapped the icon again. Lock. The screaming was cut off, muffled by 3 inches of reinforced steel and soundproof glass. They were trapped in the dark with nothing but their panic and the strobe lights. I walked to my car, the gravel crunching satisfyingly under my heels. I sat in the driver's seat, but I didn't start the engine. Not yet. I reached into the passenger seat and picked up the leather-bound portfolio I had compiled with my forensic accountant over the last 6 months. I turned on the overhead light and opened it to the summary page. The number was printed in bold, red ink at the bottom. Total misappropriated assets, $950,420. It wasn't just the $300,000 they had tried to extort tonight. That was just the tip of the iceberg. The dossier laid out a 10-year history of financial parasitism that made my stomach turn. I flipped the page. Exhibit A, identity theft. 7 credit lines opened in my name when I was 22. I had been working 80-hour weeks as a junior analyst, barely sleeping, trying to build my career. Brenda had helpfully offered to handle my mail. She had intercepted the cards, maxed them out on designer clothes and spa treatments, and then paid the minimums from a joint account I had forgotten to close. She hadn't just stolen my money, she had stolen my credit score, my reputation, my financial identity. I flipped again. Exhibit B, the retirement drain. This was the one that had turned my sadness into cold, hard rage. 2 years ago, Jeffrey had forged a power of attorney document. He had accessed my primary retirement fund money I had been saving since I was 18 and drained nearly $200,000. The memo line on the withdrawal said, "Medical emergency." There was no emergency. There was a new boat. A boat he had named the Good Life. He was sailing on my future. And then, Exhibit C, the startups. Kyle's investments. The dossier contained police reports and casino records from Las Vegas. Kyle wasn't an entrepreneur. He was a gambling addict with a delusion of grandeur. The tech incubator I had funded 3 years ago, it was a blackjack table at the Bellagio. The supply chain logistics firm, it was a bookie named Sal. They had called me cold. They had called me unfeeling. They called me a spinster because I focused on my career instead of starting a family. They didn't realize that my coldness was the only thing keeping them out of federal prison. For 6 months, I had sat on this evidence. I had watched them order appetizers I paid for. I had listened to them brag about vacations funded by my stolen identity. I had let them think I was clueless, a passive resource to be mined until I was empty. They thought my silence was weakness. They didn't understand the difference between a victim and an auditor. A victim cries about the theft. An auditor tracks every single penny, compiles the evidence, and waits for the fiscal year to end. Tonight, the fiscal year was over. I looked back at the house. The strobe lights were still pulsing inside. Frantic bursts of light in the darkness. They were terrified in there. They were probably calling their lawyers. Or the police. Realizing that, for the first time in their lives, the bill had arrived. And they couldn't pass it across the table to me. I closed the portfolio. The heavy thud of the leather cover felt like a gavel coming down. I started the car. The engine purring to life. They broke my trust. They stole my history. They tried to mortgage my future. But as I shifted into drive and pulled away from the prison of glass I had just created, I felt a surge of pure, icy power. They owed me $950,000. And I was going to collect every cent, one way or another. Sunday passed in a silence so profound it felt like a physical weight had been lifted from my chest. I spent the day in my apartment, drinking coffee, reading a book, and not checking my phone. I assumed the silence meant victory. I assumed that by locking them out and cutting off the money, I had forced them into a corner where they would finally have to face their own mess. I slept deeply that night. The sleep of the righteous. I thought the war was over. I thought I had won. I was wrong. The war had just moved fronts. Monday morning, I walked into the lobby of the Financial District skyscraper where I had spent the last 5 years building my reputation. I was the CFO of a mid-sized fintech firm. I was respected. I was essential. I walked to the security turnstile, my heels clicking on the marble, and tapped my badge. It didn't beep. It flashed red. Access denied. I tapped it again, frowning. "Hey, Mike," I said to the guard I greeted every morning. "I think my chip is demagnetized." Mike didn't smile. He didn't look at me. He looked at the floor. "I'm sorry. Ms. Stone, I can't let you up. HR is on their way down." My stomach dropped. A cold, prickling sensation spread across my skin. "What are you talking about?" 2 minutes later, the head of compliance stepped off the elevator. He didn't invite me to a conference room. He didn't offer me coffee. He handed me a cardboard box containing my framed degree, my stapler, and a cactus. Then he handed me a sealed envelope. "Effective immediately," he said, his voice devoid of the warmth we had shared at the company holiday party just a week ago. "You are placed on administrative leave pending an external audit and an SEC investigation." Investigation for what I demanded. my voice echoing in the busy lobby. Embezzlement, he said. We received the whistleblower complaint. Madison. It came from your personal email. It detailed everything. The gambling debts. The offshore accounts. It looks like you were trying to get ahead of it. But the board had to act. I stood on the sidewalk 5 minutes later, clutching the box. The morning sun glaring off the glass building I was no longer allowed to enter. My personal email. The old one. The one I hadn't used in years but had logged into on my father's iPad so he could send photos of the renovations. I had never changed the password. Jeffrey hadn't just gotten mad. He had gotten even. He knew he couldn't get the money back. He knew the house was gone. So he decided to burn down the only thing I had left my career. It's called the scorched earth policy. In the psychology of a narcissist, it is the final, desperate maneuver of a losing battle. When a toxic person realizes they can no longer control you, when they realize the asset they felt entitled to has declared independence, they don't walk away. They switch to destruction. The logic is terrifyingly simple. If I can't own you, I will destroy you so no one else can have you. To Jeffrey, my salary wasn't mine. It was family property. If he couldn't access it, he would make sure it ceased to exist. He would rather see his daughter destitute and disgraced than successful and free. They tried guilt, then threats. Now they tried to starve me out. The letter in my hand said SEC investigation, not just a firing, but a career death sentence. Even if I was cleared, the stain would linger. No one hires a CFO investigated for fraud. My phone buzzed. How does it feel to be locked out, Dad? He thought he'd won. Take my job. Break my will. Force me to crawl back. But as I stared at the skyscraper across the street, it clicked. He'd made a fatal mistake. He assumed I'd react like a daughter. He forgot, I think, like a forensic accountant. I didn't go home to cry. I went to a coffee shop, opened my laptop, and followed the trail. Same cloud account. Same iPad. Same IP address. There it was. Activity logs proving he'd sent the whistleblower email in my name. I had enough to clear myself. But suing him would only give him a stage. I needed a weapon that couldn't be gaslit. So I called my tax attorney. I don't want to collect the family debt, I said. I want to forgive it. They signed the debt forgiveness agreement eagerly, nearly $1 million erased. They thought they'd won. 3 months later came April 15. I filed IRS Form 1099-C. Canceled debt is taxable income. The IRS didn't argue. It billed them $380. 000. Due immediately. When my father called, panicking, I was calm. You don't owe me anymore, I said. You owe the U.S. government. The glass house was auctioned. The family scattered. My name was cleared. I was reinstated with an apology. I stayed in my modest apartment. Solid walls. Closed blinds. I deleted their numbers. No drama. Just cleanup. They tried to turn me into a transaction. I just made sure they got the receipt.